Think Realty Nation? It's your host, Avi Golhar. Welcome to the Think Realty podcast. We have a really good show for you today. We're talking about land contracts, turnkey investing, and promoting asset ownership, which I think is really cool. My friend Austin Kerr from Equity and Help will be joining us in just a second. After that interview, you want to stay tuned because we're talking about 7 real estate investing trends that are starting to become a little popular. I'm going to see how many of these trends we can get through, and then I'll make sure that you know exactly where to read the rest of that article. Okay, that being said, this podcast today is brought to you by Norada Real Estate Investments, your premier source for cash flow investment property. Visit them at www.turnkeyrealestateinvestments.com. All right, first on the docket, Austin Kerr from Equity and Help Incorporated. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Doing very good. Thanks for having me.
Hey, you got it. So give us a little rundown. Who are you and what do you do?
So I'm an executive at Equity and Help. We are a concierge real estate investment company. The name of the game for us is through land contracts. This allows not only the investor to own an asset themselves, but for that family to own that asset eventually as well. And then selling through a land contract can also be much better than renting for various reasons I'm guessing we'll probably get into.
For sure. And I think a lot of investors, too, are kind of wondering, what the heck is a land contract? So I was looking guys up, and you're on the Inc. 500 list this year, so congratulations for that. That's like a huge, huge deal. And how do you even get on that list? Like, I want to get on that list. Like, who do I have to pay off to get on the Inc. 500 list, right? Like, I don't even know anymore. I think you just have to be a really awesome company. So congratulations for that. You mentioned land contract. Give me a quick 1-2 punch on what that is and how real estate investors use that vehicle.
Absolutely. So there's kind of 2 positions when you're trying to hold a property and make that passive income for a long time versus like a quick flip or developing or anything like that. Your 2 options there are the more traditional route, which is to become a landlord, and the other route is through land contracts in which you become a bank. So the main differences here is, for me, when I look at it, I always think of a bank as the kind of the primary place of power, right? So a bank is the one, it's the house, and the house always wins. So they are happy to fund people doing flips. They're happy to fund people doing rental, to do, their own asset ownership. And the whole time, the bank knows that they're going to probably make the most money out of the deal. And that's because of the kind of the power of lending and the different advantages to the different paths that lending can take you.
I like that. You want to be the bank because the bank's always going to win. Well, then, duh, right? Like, let's just do that. Wins. So how do I set up a land contract? Is it like I obviously work with Equity and Help to do so, or go to an online LegalZoom.com and maybe set it up that way?
Yeah, there's many ways you could set up a land contract. You can obviously just contract a lawyer. LegalZoom might have some forms for you. You can have different contracts per state. There's different land contract laws for each place. But basically, a land contract is just a seller finance mortgage. So instead of the traditional route where you have a person who owns a property, a person who wants to buy a property, and then a bank, whereas the bank is the one who actually buys the property, and then they own the property while the guy who wants to buy the property is paying it off over time. You're just cutting out that bank. And so the person who's the asset owner ends up being the person who's financing the person who's buying it. To make it kind of simple. It's a little bit easier when I have when people can see my hands and I can use pieces of rock to represent things. But yeah, nice. So what you're basically going to have to do is you have to be aware of the local laws or the laws regarding a land contract. One of the main advantages of a land contract being that you are actually in the power or in the position of a bank as far as requirements go as well. So when you're a landlord, you end up often kind of having to take on a new job. You're having to deal with tenants who are going to call you who might need their toilet fixed. You're going to deal with when someone leaves the property getting damaged. You're going to deal with the taxes, the insurance, the further encumbrances that kind of take away from your profit. And so on a land contract, the family is responsible for all of that, just the same way that you are when you buy a home through a lender. So you're not only leveraging your money, you're also leveraging someone else's time and someone else's efforts to improve that property. And so that's kind of like one of the main reasons why someone should choose a land contract over some of the other vehicles they can use.
So if I wanted to exit out of that deal, how does that play into the overall structure? Like, is it tougher to sell a deal if I have it wrapped in a land contract, or exit a deal if I'm using a land contract, or is it easier to do that?
It is definitely hard. That is, like, if there's any disadvantage to a land contract, is that it is a much longer term obligation. You're usually putting a family into a contract for 20 years or 30 years. And that, because that person's in a land contract, you don't have the right to kick them out. There's no, okay, at the end of this year, they're going to have to renew their lease, and so I can change it on them. That family does actually hold a position of some power in that arrangement. As long as they're making their payments, as long as they're honoring the terms of that land contract, it's their home. So while that can be definitely a disadvantage for some people, me personally, I own properties as well as the company obviously manages about 350. The advantage being that the families themselves are actually getting their lives improved by owning some real assets that they can then later sell, or, that they can pay off the loan or do whatever they want with, and they know that they're not going to get kicked out on the street. They know that this is actually my house that I can build my family and become a part of that community in. So if you do want to get out of it, you really just have to sell it as a property with a land contract on it, which does definitely limit the pool. Not as many people are as like the traditional market. You can't really just go up to your average realtor and say, hey, I have someone in a land contract, I want to sell it. They usually won't know what to do. But there are various markets for properties that already have families in them, just because obviously then you don't have to do the work of finding the family who's then going to be in that property long term.
Got it. For real estate investors today that are looking at the market and they're thinking, well, geez, I have a few different options. I can invest out of state, I can invest in state, and I don't want to do a whole lot of work. Turnkey real estate investing is a potential option if you find the right provider of these opportunities. What are your thoughts on turnkey?
Well, one of the main things, like, so for us, for instance, and also with the power of a land contract, we don't actually do anything in the state that the investors are in. So we have a lot of foreign investors. We have a lot of investors in California, Boston, Florida, where properties are a lot more expensive. So for us, we deal with lower end properties only. We're only, the average price that we sell a property to an investor for is around $45,000. So these are definitely like on the lower end side of things. And our investors are able to buy the properties, and they don't have to be near them. They don't have to worry about them. It's not going to take over their life. So, I mean, it can be a big advantage. The time where I find that people don't want that sort of opportunity are people who are looking for something to do. So some people, they might have some money, or, they just left their job, or, they sold a company and they have some funds. They want to get into investing. They want to get into real estate. But they also want to get into something to do with their life. Everybody needs something that kind of wakes them up in the morning, something that they're going to put time into trying to perfect. And turnkey investing, and especially land contract, aren't that game. They're more for people who are already busy, who are maybe retired, want to spend lots of time with their kids, who are, looking for that excellent option of being able to have the power of real estate, but not take on a second job. And so for those people, it's perfect. But like I said, for others, it's like a nightmare. They just want something they can like run, and equity and help or land projects specifically aren't necessarily that thing to run.
Makes sense. And in terms of flipping real estate, we haven't talked about that yet between you and me here on the show, but flipping real estate means that you're going to put an asset on your balance sheet and then you're taking it off, right? When you buy it, it's on your balance sheet for the duration of the time you're renovating it. When you sell it, it's off your balance sheet, and your balance sheet gets back to that net zero plus the cash infusion as a result of the sale. Yeah, or a loss, right?
Yeah.
In terms of overall asset ownership, how important is that today more so than it has in the past for real estate investors that are only buying and flipping real estate?
You're just saying like how important, are you saying like holding on to that real estate or just having that real estate for the time being?
Yeah, essentially promoting asset ownership, right? Like buying and holding for the long term.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, especially as we see this kind of flipping industry exploding. It's getting much larger. There's TV shows about it. It's becoming kind of like almost an afterthought, and then 80% of the population's mind. Hey, yeah, I could flip a home. This would be interesting, and it is really it's really cool. It's really attractive for those reasons. It just is also. I don't know. It's very similar to investing in the stock market, where you're like you can be like a day trader and you can buy assets and then try to figure out how fast you can sell them. There's obviously huge upsides to it. There's also huge downsides to it if something happens to that market or if a reno goes over budget. And your entire mindset is really just based on trying to get out of that asset. Then you're putting a lot more leverage or putting a lot more pressure on those individual assets in that individual period of time.
Yeah.
And so it is very similar to like a gambling or there's something along those lines where you just have to have the knowledge to really be able to make it work for you. Whereas at the end of the day, or at the end of 10 years, you still end up with, okay, maybe some money, but you spend a lot of time and you don't really have anything to speak for necessarily, depending on what you do with your money. Whereas when you actually are owning assets and you're trying to amass assets, that gives you a certain type of power because, I mean, especially as far as real estate goes, you're owning dirt, which is really the last great commodity of the modern world, where, gold and there's different diamonds that can come up with new types of alloys that are also going to be precious. And, if we end up going into space and find things there, it also might devalue some of the other minerals we have. Owning companies, can obviously be great, but depending on what happens with the world, that company could go bankrupt, another company can steal the market share. There's so many volatile situations. But when you own a property, you actually own something that people always need. Even through the Great Depression, the people who were smart enough not to sell their assets for loaves of bread or whatever, but held onto properties or were the ones giving away loaves of bread in order to get more properties, those are the families that are now super mega rich. And it's also really interesting when you look at a place like New York, where some various families bought up a lot of New York back again through like the Depression and through those times, and now that those properties are worth so much more, population isn't going anywhere. So even if you're buying properties in the middle of Terre Haute, Indiana, or I don't know, Warren, Ohio, or some random town, you can bet that within 15 years, the population of America is going to have tripled, maybe quadrupled. If you look at the statistics, it's just going skyrocketing up. And so all of these places are going to end up being overdeveloped. And the people who own even farmland are all going to become millionaires if they hold on to it, because it is something that we're not going to get more of. And that it's just going to keep increasing in value regardless of what turns happen.
That's right. Yeah, I've always said, and I always maintain, if you believe in the United States of America, like, you should be owning property. It's that simple.
Absolutely.
One gold nugget, and then we got to go from you. Any advice that you have for either new investors, pro investors, and then of course, how do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So for new investors, the main thing is just decide what type of investor you want to be. There's obviously people who invest their time and their money into something, and then there's people who just invest for their money. And so if you're a new investor, really figure out what that end goal is before you decide on your strategy. Flipping can be great, land contracts can be great, but you want to make sure that it fits what your ideal lifestyle is. And you don't want to go after a fad that'll ultimately leave you maybe rich, but unhappy. For professional investors, diversification is obviously super important. If you're doing something like flipping and you're making lots of money with that, that's great. But think of it like a job, because you are exchanging your time for it. Also, make sure that you're taking your money either way and you're putting into something that's stable and that does create the money in the long term, because eventually you're going to get tired of what you're doing. Eventually, a market will get cut out, and you're going to need to have an asset you can fall back on. And then just for getting in touch with us, equityandhelp.com. Equity, like what you get in property, and help, like to make something better for someone else. That's our website. And then our phone number is 844-552-8828. You can reach me at my email at akerr@equityandhelp.com.
I like it, man. Yeah, it's funny. We talk about having the right assets and having the right allocation of these assets. And I was on, I think, Investor Business Daily a little while ago, and they're like, hey, if you purchased the Lego set like 5 or 10 years ago, that Lego set is like increasing in value at like 3 or 4% a year. It's just funny.
Wow.
Yeah, but like owning a Lego set's not going to be your way to riches, obviously. It's going to be owning property, and that's what's going to build and sustain.
Yeah.
So, Austin, I certainly appreciate the time. Good to see you again. Thank you, Realty Nation. You want to get in touch with him, Kerr@equityandhelp.com, or you can also visit www.equityandhelp.com. This next segment is brought to you by Real Property Management, which is the largest residential property management franchise in North America, managing tens of thousands of properties for individuals, investors, and institutions throughout the country. Learn more at realpropertymgt.com or call 888-806-7088. 7 real estate investing trends to watch, and it's interesting, I actually agree with some of these. You can tell me which ones you agree with and which ones you don't by visiting me online anywhere, preferably Instagram or LinkedIn, at Abhi Golhar. Number 1, the move towards specialization. You know, it's one thing just to be flipping properties. It's another thing to be really honing in on senior housing, medical offices, cell towers, the data centers, co-living spaces, hotels, retail, multifamily. And getting very specific and getting very specialized can help you make a lot more money instead of just being a generalist, right? It's one thing to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. So keep that in mind. Number 2, the second trend is an ever-growing live, work, play mantra. So if you are building a community, kind of keep that in mind, live, work, and play. Number 3, heat as an influencer. So nice, warm markets will definitely feel good to a lot of people, kind of like me, right? Like I grew up in Michigan, hate the cold, moved to Georgia, love it here. It's fantastic unless it's 21 degrees somehow, which it can get to, and it's freezing and it's not fun. Number 5, that's number 3. Where's number 4? Did we skip number 4? Look at that. The title should have been 6 because they skipped number 4. It's okay. Number 5, a focus on community. If you have a multi-family complex and you're not focusing on community and building the community and building that support, you're losing the game. It's one way to take care of your residents and also ensure that your property has long-term success. So keep that in mind. And I'll kind of take a look at this one here. Boomers will make themselves known as number 6 here. By 2029, there will be more than 14 million middle-income earning baby boomers aged 75 or older. And seniors with too much income for government support, seniors with too much income for government support, but too little to handle housing and medical costs privately for long, there will be the most diverse, educated generations of seniors ever. So guess what? Senior housing. There's a crazy opportunity right now for senior housing. And if you want to learn more about that, definitely pay attention to my man, Gene Guarino. He understands that world. And I'm coming to really enjoy it as well. So, Think Realty Nation. Those are a couple trends. What do you think? Get in touch. Let us know. Go to thinkrealty.com. We cannot put on this show and this podcast without the help of our sponsors. So today's sponsor is Nevada Real Estate Investments. Thank you guys so much for sponsoring this podcast. So visit www.turnkeyrealestateinvestments.com. Nevada Real Estate Investments is your source, your premier source for cash flow investment property. Again, www.turnkeyrealestateinvestments.com. Think Realty Nation. Until next time, happy investing.